Welcome back to Cuyahoga Sound Podcast. I'm Evan Stone.
I'm Chuck Schilling.
Today we have Jamie Stillman with us today.
Hello.
Of Earthquaker Devices, founder, president, CEO. What other titles do you hold?
Well, just founder, technically founder, president, and product designer is what my email signature says.
And I'm also a client.
My wife's the CEO. I always feel ridiculous listing off what I do. I tend to pick one. Today I'll go with product designer.
All right.
All right, product designer. Great. Well, let's start at the beginning. Let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
All right. So, musically,
Yes.
you're a musician first before you got
Yeah.
into electronics or sound.
Yeah. pretty
Cool.
much.
So, what got you into playing music or
Playing music?
excited about music when you do that?
I don't really know. I have been a musician for as long as I can remember. Like, there's pictures of me at like 5 years old playing drums. Like, I've never thought about doing anything else. Like, even as like a kid, like I was into like skateboarding and BMX, but always was just like, I'm a musician. And as I got older, I feel like it was maybe like scarier or something, where I was like, well, I don't want to do anything but play music. Like, I should try to figure out how to make this work. Not like I put any thought into it, but just like, okay, what do bands do? It's like put out records. So I started putting out records when I was 13, and then started touring like as soon as my spring break in my senior year of high school. I had just joined this band called Harriet the Spy. I went on tour for my spring break. I think I was 17 or just turned 18. I don't know. And then I did that until my like early 30s. Just toured in bands and worked terrible jobs. Actually, that's not true. I drove a Zamboni at the Kent State Ice Arena, which is like a cool job, but it doesn't pay well or anything like that. And then after that,
I went to college there.
Yeah,
I know that ice arena.
yeah. I went to school like.
We mentioned Kent every day.
Oddly enough,
Kent
that's one
gets
of the things
mentioned.
that I heard in one of the podcasts.
Yeah.
Was the Kent gets mentioned a lot, but I grew
All
up
the
there.
time, yeah.
My parents moved there when I was like seven or eight, so I grew up in Kent.
So did you get pushed back from your parents at 17 going on tour?
Yeah and no. Like my parents, I have a weird relationship with my parents, but my parents they were supportive. Yeah, like they got me a van, and they were always
Nice.
they bought me my first drums. And
Did you
guitars
play
and
drums
stuff
in
like
the?
that. Yeah, I
Harriet
played
the
drums
Spy?
in Harriet the Spy. I primarily played drums for a while, really, just in bands, and I've only been in 3 bands where I play guitar. But yeah, I mean, I've been playing music forever, and that's I'm just always involved in some facet of music.
And you've always been based like Akron area.
Yeah, grew up in Kent. I moved to Akron when I was in my probably late 20s. I've been here, there since. Yeah.
All right. So what was that music scene like in those days, the Akron, Kent music scene?
Well, to speak for Kent, Kent was awesome. Like growing up, like it's a college town. It's a pretty arty one, and there's like a couple pizza shops there. One of them is still doing shows, Europe Gyro.
Oh yeah, Euro.
I think that we did the first shows at that Europe Gyro when like you used to have to push the tables out of the way and you just sit up on the floor and play in the corner. And there was a place called.
Sounds horrible.
Yeah. There's a place called, I think it was initially called Singing Sam's and then changed its name to Mama Joe's. We did a bunch of shows in the basement there. But that was like, with the college there, and I was in high school, and like I kind of grew up into hair metal. And then like in the early 90s, like the whole alternative thing like blew up, and I was like briefly into that, but then there was all these like cool, like weirdo experimental bands from Kent, like this band called Throttle Bottom, and this like in today's world horribly offensive band called Sakai, who were just kind of like a joke punk band. But like as a teenager, like seeing those people like do it, like they weren't like skilled musicians, but it was like this totally unique noise coming out. Like it blew my mind, like when I was probably like 9th grade, however old you are then, like 13, 14. And then I like befriended those people, in particular like a friend of mine still to this day who just started working at Earthquaker, Dave Neeson. He was in this band Throttle Bottom, and like meeting him, I think changed like the entire course of my life. Like it showed me like DIY culture. Like you didn't need a label, you didn't need like a booking agent. You could just decide you're gonna go on tour, and like here's where you look to get these numbers. Like you could just put out a tape, you could record in your basement, and that like sort of like set me off on the path that I've been on today. Like everything that I do is kind of influenced from that, where it's like I want to do this. How do other people do it? Okay, well, how would I do it? And just start doing it and hope for the best.
Nice. That's nice.
Yeah.
That's
So I
inspiring.
mean, yes, I guess to go back to that question, like the music scene then, I mean, it was awesome for what I was into, which was like punk rock and like noise and DIY, playing shows in houses and stuff like that. And that's how I toured for years, like, you know, playing in like sheds in the middle of a field, or like in a retirement home, or in, you know, somebody's basement.
Did you make it overseas with
like
these
that.
tours?
I did. Like, I toured the UK or Europe for the first time in like 1996, and it was a miserable disaster. Like, we bailed halfway through it. Like after like the third night, third night. It was probably like 10 nights in a row of sleeping in abandoned buildings or just on the street. We were like, you know what? We're not making any money. We can't do this at all. And then we just bailed on the tour in the middle of it. It was like pre-internet too, and like, you know, we booked those tours using like phone dialers. There was like a machine that you could hold up to a payphone, and it would think that you deposited money in it, and we call Europe and try to and like you know, mailing letters back and forth. And you know, on some bad advice, we switched booking agents halfway through the tour, and it was a disaster. But then, yeah, like years later, my other band that I play guitar in for a long time, called the Party of Helicopters, we went over and did like a 2-week tour of just the UK, which sounds weird, but that was awesome. It was really cool. And now I travel for Earthquaker. It was a completely different experience. I still look at that like touring a little bit, because we visit our distributors in all the countries and stuff.
You guys, there's some great content on your YouTube channel. First of all, there's some great videos on
Thank you.
there.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff going on in Japan with Earthquaker devices.
Yeah, Julie and I heavily focused on Japan for several years. Like it's an important area in like the world of musical instruments, and people don't really talk about it a lot. But it's very hard to like kind of break into that market unless like you really know the culture, which is where I think a lot of people, I don't want to say fail, but it's like a thing that a lot of people just, you know, a lot of companies from the US are just like, we need to get our stuff into, you know, Japan, China, Europe. They look it up and they like find a distributor, and then they just sell there, and they think that what they do here should just translate everywhere else, and it totally does not work that way. And Japan is really like, that's a very special case. So like we went over there and like immediately, first of all, fell in love with Japan. It's my favorite place I've ever been. I love Japan. And we interviewed a lot of distributors over there, and like ultimately like we found an awesome partner in Yamaha, which is not who we would have ever thought, and not what anybody would have ever thought for us. But like we really hit it off with Shu, who's our rep there, and he's got a lot of really great ideas, and they're really receptive to our ideas. And you know, Julie thinks a lot about like, you know, how we come across, like how to promote ourselves, and we just ended up being like this really great team. But that wasn't enough. Like you really have to focus on that, on Japan, like learn the customs, like learn what they're into, and it's really different from everywhere else. And we just kind of got excited by that whole thing, you know, and also like falling in love with the country, like going over there twice a year. And then we did this. Julie came up with this idea called the Pedal Summit, which we held there. And it was like us and a bunch of other brands like kind of exhibiting just guitar effect pedals. And that was like unheard of in Japan. Like they don't like talk with their competition and stuff like that. So it was kind of like a groundbreaking thing where they realized, oh, like we're all in the same world. Over here, like it's pretty common. Like we interact with our main, I'll use this in quotes, like competition all the time because we're all in the same boat. Like there's it's like a friendly competition. It's not even competition. We're just friends in the same industry. Unheard of over there. So like like doing things like that feels really good, and it's cool just to like change people's perspectives, or it's like, oh, we don't have to be in competition. Like,
were they receptive to that, or was there...
Yeah, they were. Like I think people were a little bit confused on why they would do stuff like that, and some people backed out, but the people that came, like, it was a super successful event. And then I think it was later that year, the following year, we did another thing that like people haven't really done. We did a tour of Japan. So we brought like a bunch of Earthquaker pedals and merchandise, and then my band Relaxer, and then we brought Lisa Belladonna, artist from Columbus, and then from Japan we had Crypt City and this band Boris, and we all four bands played every night, and then we had like the Earthquaker merch booth set up, and it like brought out all kinds of different people who were interested in pedals, people who were just interested in the bands, and or just like interested in Boris or Crypt City, things like that. And it was awesome. It was like it just turned out way better than like any of us would have expected. And like I think even Yamaha were like, oh, this is unheard of. Who would do something like this? But and then the pandemic hit. We had another one planned, and so all of that stuff's been put on the back burner, but we're gonna try to do more stuff like that. And the idea was to take that to other places where Earthquaker has a presence, like do Europe and then do Australia, do things like that. I don't know. It was a really fun thing to do.
Cool. That sounds great. Innovative. Nice. So you're saying, in contrast to just the companies who send their product over just expecting it to work the same, you guys took some trips over there to figure out how to present it.
Yeah, we do that a lot. It's very important to us, Julie and I in particular, that like who we work with directly like share like the same values, like ideals as us, that like we can get along. Like our company is like, it's not about the highest sales and things like that. It's about like kind of like, I don't know how to really put it, like,
you trying to break ground in the pedal industry?
Yeah. I wouldn't even say that's our goal. It's just to like be well represented. Like we don't want anybody out there like giving the wrong idea of our brand or just being pushy salesmen or like it's like just being in as much control as we can be of like the brand like image, and like being careful who we work with. And I don't know, it's like just an extension of who we are as people. It's not just like, here's products, sell them, make as much money as possible and send it back to us. Like we like to get involved so we can do things like we did in Japan. And we've been fortunate enough to find through this process that we do, like we did the same thing we did in Japan and like Australia. We did it in Europe, and we divided Europe up between a bunch of different distributors, but we met with so many of them before we were like, this is a good fit. Like we can meet face to face and we can relate, and like we're receptive to their ideas, they're receptive to ours. And I don't think that's the way a lot of people do business, especially in the pedal industry, because I mean, there's 1.5 million pedal companies. My joke is every guitar player with a soldering iron is a pedal company. And it's just uncommon, but it's also just the way that we do things and have always done them.
So that's probably explains why, like, when you look up Earthquaker, we see you all the time. Is that part of making sure that you're very much a part of the way your brand is represented out there?
Well, it's not important to me that like I'm out there at all. I'm very reluctant to be on camera. It's like, all honesty, like it used to make me super nervous, which makes me question like the decisions like that I made. Like I choose to be in bands and start businesses and things like that, but I'm also like very like a recluse. Like I don't like going out that much, and like definitely don't like being the center of attention. But I don't mind it, you know.
Yeah.
And whenever, like, we have a marketing team, and now we do, and they're all awesome, like amazing at what they do. Like a lot of the content that you see are, you know, is their ideas, or you know, they put it together.
Yeah.
A lot of them find those artists and stuff like that, and you know, reach out to them and set up all that stuff. So when they are like, "Hey, we want to do a video with you," then I say yes. But I don't think to this day I've ever been like, "Hey, I want to shoot this thing."
There's some cool ones, and I love that they aren't all about your products. Like I sent Evan I forgot the exact title, but it was like "Show Me Your Junk" or something. And
Yeah, the show us your junk. That was
great.
Julie's idea, I think. And I like that series too. Like, that's probably we get. I don't think it helps us sell pedals at all, but it's like definitely brings a lot of people to like our YouTube channel. And I mean, it's important to us to kind of like a lot of those are centered around like recording studios.
yeah,
And recording studios are just dying left and right, and the ones that are around, there's a reason why they're around. Like, there's these like brilliant engineers there, and like most of those people, like when you would never know that they're brilliant engineers. They're like so humble about all their stuff. But those people also have like these amazing collections of gear, and
Yeah.
like because rent is so high in like LA and New York, like they have these really creative studio spaces, and it's really interesting. And I don't think a lot of people think about that stuff anymore, especially like in modern times,
Yeah.
where like anybody could have a studio in their house, like I do. You know, like anybody can.
yeah.
It's fun to show that kind of stuff. think.
I loved seeing the old DIY pedal board that you got that was in all the
Oh
pre-memes.
yeah, that the
1987
the spaceship. Yeah.
I remember seeing that in on forums and stuff in the early 2000s. So that you pulled that out in the one episode. I was
Yeah,
It looks
that-
like it was about to create a time portal.
Yeah, that thing. I know I said it in there, but like that. Yeah, that thing blew my mind when my friend Ben V. Horn. He used to work at Earthquaker, and he had a studio. I remember going in there to practice one day. I was just sitting there, like I couldn't process that I was looking at this thing in real life that I had seen on the internet so often and been like, that's insane. That, you know, not only was I looking at it, it belonged to this dude that I have known for a while. He's never once mentioned that he owns this crazy thing. Never once.
Never seen anything.
Yeah,
like
the first time I saw it, I bought it.
I like your description where it's like guitar folk art.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that is what it is. It's kind of what it is.
Yeah,
really.
absolutely.
I mean,
And seeing a meme come to life, you know,
Yeah.
that had to be mind blowing.
that's like, it's the kind of thing that I feel like you would joke about, like when you were stoned, and then you would never think about it again. But that whoever that guy was brought it into reality. Like, probably wasted so much of his life putting that thing together for it to not work and just end up in Akron, Ohio, in my weird collection.
Let's go back to let's go back to the beginning of like the infant stages of your company.
Earthquaker?
Yeah, I'm sure it started just you, right? And
Yeah.
when did you build your first pedal, or what gave you the inspiration to start going down
So-
that path?
Like, vaguely can remember this, but it's like a Party of Helicopters. We were together for like almost 10 years, and we had just broken up. And through that, I didn't really ever have money or anything like that, and I always had like a little pedal board, which in like the mid 90s, like touring in like the world that I did, like that, people didn't show up with pedal boards and
In
stuff
punk
like
rock.
that. Yeah, like, you know, it was considered flashy or something like that. But I'd always I'd always had an interest in like just making the guitar sound like things other than guitar, but not necessarily any real knowledge of that. Like, you'd be surprised at I am surprised at how much of an idiot I was for so much of my life playing guitar until I stopped like actively touring in bands. And then I was like, oh, there's like fuzz pedals, and that's what I hear that I like. That's why I can't make my guitar sound, you know, like whatever, Jimi Hendrix, like, because I'm using like, you know, some like high gain distortion. Like I started to like understand like, oh, there's this whole world of stuff. And this is probably like 2003, 2004. So then I started collecting pedals just anytime I could, and cheap ones because I didn't really have any money. And I ended up getting this old DoD 250 in that process, and I loved the way it sounded. It was like, in hindsight, I didn't know this then, but like to me, it was, the way this one sounded was like a perfect mix between like a Marshall overdrive and like a fuzz face. Like this, it was like a really great sound. But it broke, and I bought a replacement, like a modern replacement. It didn't sound anything like it, and I was like, well, what? Let me see if I can figure out why this broke. And I think it was something super simple, like a pot or something like that. But I had just Googled like DoD 250 schematic and like found this website, General Guitar Gadgets, and like they had everything there. And then there's all these other projects. So I was able to repair this pedal, and I was super excited. Like, oh, I saw her, like in hindsight, I saw her like a wire or something. I was like, oh, this is great. But then like my next step was I just downloaded the project information and built a clone of it, and it worked. And then I just got excited by that. And I think the next thing I want to build was a fuzz face, which is like 7 parts. Everybody thinks that those pedals are really simple and anybody could build one, and that's bullshit. Like, I still, to this day, will build a fuzz face, and it won't work. Like, still. And at this point, I call myself a professional. But those parts all matter. Like, it just matters, like, how you, like, the transistors, like, the leakage, like, the measurements. Like, oh, every resistor has a purpose, and you change it a little bit, it's a completely different sound. So I built, like, 5 of those. One of them caught on fire. One of them, like, so I don't know how, but I remember it blew up this basement amp that I had. Did all this shit, and then I finally, like, got it to work, and, like, I don't know. I just enjoyed like that like process, like the trial and error process. It spoke to all the things that I like to do, which is like learn just a little bit about something and then go for it. Yeah. And it combined like the music and art, which is what I liked. I was going to school for graphic design, and I just started doing that like half-assed professionally, we'll call it. And I felt like it just kind of married both things. Plus, as like growing up, like I was like that person who took everything apart and was like, how does this work? And then like put it back together, but didn't learn the skills of it or like with the word. I just enjoyed that process of doing it. So all of that fed into like this, like, oh, well, this is a lot of fun. So then I just started building pedals for friends pretty much. And then I think 2005, I kind of conceived like a concept for art. Took the name Earthquaker, which was stolen from, well, not stolen, like some friends of mine who were in this band called the Minus Tide from West Virginia used to always joke about starting a fake heavy metal band called Earthquaker. And at the time, I must have just been thinking about it. It was like Earthquaker Devices. We'll call it that, whatever.
What's fake heavy metal?
What's that, fake heavy metal? I don't know. I don't really know.
Oh, the band was fake.
The concept of starting this band, Earthquaker, was like contrived, like Iron Maiden-ish, like metal band or something. Yeah. I don't know what I mean by that necessarily, but it wasn't a real band.
Okay. Flavor Town, that one that I came up with.
Yeah. It was disgusting. So yeah, I mean it was all very haphazard, but like my initial idea for the art was like these kind of like there were a bunch of images pulled from a book called Devils, Demons, and Witchcraft, this like clip art book of like old kind of medieval like woodcut art, and I just colored it in, made all the pedals like look like a brand, and I put them up on eBay, and they sat there for like 6 months, and nobody bought anything. But I got a lot of like emails like, oh, these look really cool, good luck. But no one bought anything. And at that time, I started working, tour managing for the Black Keys. And Dan was heavily into pedals too. And like he started showing me like there's like a whole world of like DIY pedal companies. I had zero concept of this, that like this world that I came from also existed in like another industry. So I think my first introduction to that was Death by Audio. Who I'm still a huge fan of, and I got to collaborate with them a couple years ago on a pedal, which I was very excited to do. I love everything about their company, the people, their aesthetic, like the ridiculous sounds that the pedals make, and I don't know. Just from the same world I am, and that spoke to me. So that made me kind of like rethink, like, oh, okay, maybe I should like put more thought into this now that I know there is this world for boutique pedals. I hate that term, but like, there's like this like kind of DIY culture for pedal companies too. And he's one of the people I made pedals for, and I happened to make him a clone of a Big Muff, and he used it in this video, and the video got posted on Harmony Central, and people were like, what is he using? And I was like, oh, I made that thing. So then I started taking orders for that pedal, and that pedal became the Hoof. And then that's when I kind of came up with the current aesthetic of Earthquaker, and kind of like, again, mind you, like all of this stuff is so haphazard. It was just like oh, what can I do in like an afternoon? And just like, okay, I'll put a black area here and round the corners, and here's what the fonts will be, and like just put it together. And
I like that you haven't swayed from that at all. It's still the same.
No,
way.
and there's
Same
so
look
much.
as the very beginning.
There's a huge urge and a lot of because now that we're much larger, like we get asked to partner with people, and there's like still things that like I know don't work aesthetically with what other people want to do, but I'm like, there has to be some element of our branding in this, just to kind of like, someone has to be the brand police. But there's even like an urge for me and like other people in the company to like use 2 colors on a pedal, but it's like, nope, we set our rules. It's 1 color and that's it. And I like that, honestly. Like I always wish that like other brands would just stay the same, because they always come back.
Yeah.
Like, they always come back
It's
to
so
what their
recognizable.
original.
It's so recognizable too. You can like just one glance at a pedal board, you can see how many Earthquakers there are.
Yeah,
You know?
it's
like that Earthquaker there, and like the one color, the font, the what's the name of the book with the pictures?
Devils, Demons, and Witchcraft.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, now we have it in-house, our illustrator, Matt Horak. And he's done pretty much every illustration since 2012. Prior to that, I did all of them except for a couple, and I still have my hands. Like, he gives me the art and I lay it out, like the drawings, and I lay it out. And I think I've done a couple pedal, like I did Plumes and in Data Corruptor. Well, Data Corruptor we split. But like, yeah, I enjoy doing that. I enjoy doing all aspects of that part of it. It's like the business side of things that's like way out of my league now. So like, yeah, it's important to me to like maintain that aesthetic, even like when I'm fighting myself for it. But yeah, what I really appreciate it when a brand picks an aesthetic and they just stick to it, and they can modify it in small ways that like almost no one can tell. And I don't know if it's just my age or whatever, or being a graphic designer, going to school for graphic design. Like, I always go to Burger King for this. Like, I don't know if you remember, like, they always had, like, their stupid logo between the 2 hamburger buns. And then one day they were like, we're new Burger King. And it was, like, all bubbly and, like, stupid looking.
Lots of triangles.
Yeah, and, like, a swirling thing. And now they've kind of,
they changed the fries with that, too.
Yeah, they did.
Like, that was the one good thing to come out of that.
I'm no, like, snob about fast food. I'll eat plenty of fast food, but that's the one restaurant that if I have to be nearly dead to go eat at Burger King for some reason.
I'm with you there. I did eat more than normal last 2 years, because where I lived there was just a Burger King and a Wendy's, and you had to drive a couple miles to get more, but which isn't far, but like around the corner. Okay.
The one time I've eaten Burger King, I think in like the last like 15 years, maybe 20 years, I was in Columbiana. On a rare occasion, I had to go pick stuff up from one of our powder coaters, and all they had was a Burger King, and I was about to die. And I was like, I guess I'm going to be a raccoon today. I guess this is it. And honestly, it wasn't that bad. But their logo still fucking sucks. It's so awful. But that original stupid hamburger logo is just dumb enough that it's like, that's great. And now they kind of like are half-assing back into, I don't know. That's where my mind goes all the time. Is I don't want a Burger King like our brand at all. I like it just to stay the same and slowly evolve, but in like kind of a way you can't really perceive.
Today, right now is a great time to thank our sponsor, Burger King.
Yeah. You can have it your way as long as it's their way.
Yeah.
So you, how long when
Oh,
from
yeah.
you started taking those orders for the muff pedal before you decided to like make it a company or start hiring people to
Well,
work with you?
it was a while. So I think like when it really started to like pick up, like when I could call it a business, it would be like early 2007. It was when I started getting pretty regular orders, and then like a dealer. My first dealer was actually from Japan, and then it was a U.S. company, and then little by little, like just people kept coming to me, like stores and stuff like that, and I'd say by the end of 2007, early 2008, that's when I was like, okay, this is a business now. And that's when other things started falling away. Like, I think the first thing to go was my graphic design job. I was designing essentially fake medicine packaging and like bottle labels for a printing company. I worked for this place for like 3 years, and I had no idea what they actually did. I thought they were a medical supply company. It turns out they were a printer for medical packaging. So I was making all these fake like boxes and labels for bottles and mostly PowerPoints. And I inherited that job from a friend who's folded his design firm and just sort of fell into my lap, but it paid like outrageously well. And I just got to sit at home, and it was very conducive for like doing what I did, which was like I was gone half the year tour managing, and when I was at home I was making music or making pedals, and then I could just sit down and do this stuff and knock it out and not think about it, and it kind of funded all of that stuff. But that was the first thing to go, so I was like, okay, I'll get rid of that. And then I quit tour managing and like really started focusing on Earthquaker in 2009. In 2008, that was when we really officially registered for a business, and that's when Julie was working as a banker back then, and she would come home at night and help me assemble the pedals, like put all the like switches and knobs and stuff on that, like at night. And then
Was this in Akron?
it was in Akron, yeah, in the basement of our house in Akron. And then 2010, I want to say, I know it was like literally New Year's Day. Was like we had kind of outsourced a little bit of work here and there, like hired a friend to like populate a couple circuit boards and stuff like that when I couldn't keep up. But it started to get unmanageable, I'd say, by like the end of 2009. And then we hired Jeff France, who I have known since, I don't know, we were 14, 45 now. He's still with us. He's our production manager. He's the hand in all of our demo videos. And nowadays he does a lot more. Like, he does all the audio engineering and stuff for the videos that we do, and a lot of all the live sessions and stuff. He's more involved in like the marketing, but he's a production manager, and like it was just me and him sitting in the basement like 14 hours a day, like 4 feet from each other, just building pedals. And he was kind of like, I'm really particular and really detail oriented and want everything to be perfect in a certain way, and he is like that times 10. So it was like really good to have somebody like that, like super dependable, and he wouldn't leave until like everything was perfect and we had done all the things we were going to do. And he would always like push me, because I would get sloppy after a while, but he would push me to like make sure everything is like standardized and stuff like that. And you know, he's really important for even today, like our quality standards. Like there are things that get rejected that you would never know what's wrong with it, and then like he'll be like, see, there's a dimple right here in the powder. And you're like, all right, well, I guess that's B stock. So, you know, and then 6 months after that, I think it was 6 weeks after that, we hired Justin Seeker, who is still with us. He's the host of a show called This Old Bench on our channel. And he was hired as an unpaid intern. I didn't pay him for like 6 months. And he would just come and build pedals. I built him like a rickety desk, and he sat in front of my water heater. And my lasting memory of him is one day I looked over and he like pulled like a whole like Bugs Bunny style carrot out of his pocket with like the shit hanging off at the end. Took a bite and put it back, and I was like, all right, he's a weirdo. He'll stay. And then it was like after that, we had, you know, by 2012, we had like 9-10 people working in the basement. But like, it was never my goal to like be in charge of a company. That was like the least appealing part of the whole thing, and still is. Like, I mean, it's not my driving factor, like owning a business. So back then, like, even though Julie wasn't like fully involved, she was like doing the taxes and stuff like that. And Jeff was hiring people. Like I hired him, and then after that, I was like, you make sure everybody works stuff. Like, I'm not a good, like, it's just not what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
You know, like run a company. I want to make stuff, and like, you know, I like the branding aspect of it and all those things. So 2012, we moved out of the basement, and that's when Julie came in first time and full time rather. That's when Julie came in full time and kind of took over running the business. And we moved out into our first shop, and within a year of being there, like, we were up to like 30 some employees, like 32 employees. There's like, Julie tells the story all the time. There's like one day where she hired 8 people. It was like, you have hands? Great, come work.
What year are we at right now?
2012, like probably late 2012, early 2013. And then we outgrew that shop by 2015 and then moved to where we are now, which we have also outgrown, and we bought a second building like right down the street last year. So now we're essentially 3 buildings, like over 4 blocks in downtown Akron.
I remember going to your place in downtown Akron 5 or 6 years ago and getting this pedal right here. Some work done because one of the switches was becoming faulty. You guys have warranties on your pedals,
yeah,
right?
we have a lifetime warranty.
Lifetime. So I just walked in there and I'm like, I got this problem. I forget the guy's name. Sorry, but
It's probably Jeff.
He took it and
Joe.
It was a J. Yeah.
we have so many J's. There's so many Joes, a couple Jamies. Yeah.
I think it was like
Josh's.
10 to 15 minutes. I was out of there with basically a brand new pedal, which
Awesome.
like worked like
Yeah.
I just got it.
The lifetime
Really
warranty.
appreciate that warranty. Yeah.
That was important to me. I've always honored that. Like, you know, there was no like set in stone warranty. Like, we wouldn't write anything in the beginning, but it was just like for the life of Earthquake Air Devices because of that DoD pedal. Like, I feel like things should always be able to be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't want anyone to be like disappointed that they spent some money on something and like 5 years later they gotta throw it away. I also don't want to be part of that like culture of shit. Like, you know, I've gone through like 4 dishwashers in my house in 10 years. Like, what happens?
Whoa.
They just get thrown in landfills because
Yep.
they make things to break. So, because who buys 20 dishwashers in their life?
Right.
You know, like Samsung's gonna go out of fucking business if their shit doesn't break. So like, I just don't want to be like that. Also, you had the switch replaced, and like those switches are so prone to failure. It's so hard to know like you're getting a good quality one or a bad quality one until it just one day stops working. And it was like the bane of my existence for a long time, and then we recently switched over. No pun intended. In the last like 5 years to relay-based switching, which is I think a lot more reliable. It's electronic switching, and there's no physical contacts in the button that you push. It just sort of sends you know, I don't want to even get into that, but like it's just way more reliable than a mechanical switch. Like,
It's not going to wear the same way.
yeah, there's no moving parts to break in that.
I've got like a shelf of broken pedals. It's like, but
Yeah, I
no
got a whole
earthquake at
basement
once.
full.
I think I've been through like 4. I'm on my 4th line 6 delay pedal, like that.
Yeah,
green
yeah.
one.
The deal for.
That's what it was just escaping me. But that I've kept that one for a while, because it has everything I need, and it's got a wide range of everything. I just kept getting it, but I broke one, and then like somebody fixed it, and I sold it to them. Broke another one, and it's still on my shelf. Broke another one, and still have it.
Yeah, Jeff, our production manager who I've been talking about, big fan of that pedal, has a bunch of mods to him, and he repairs other people's all the time. The switches on those things go bad constantly.
So when it comes to coming up with new pedals, so we're like, what influences that? Is that something that you hear from your ears? Is it something you hear from artists or from
It
consumers?
used to be exclusively things that I wanted. Like, even if they already existed, or a lot of times like they would have existed in some format, and it like sparked an idea where I was like, oh, well, I like that one, but I wish it did this, or it sounded a little more like this, or you know, in some cases like a rainbow machine, it was like experimenting, and then it was like seeing what happened, and it was like, oh, that's really cool. I can't think of anything else that really does this right now, like things like that. Afterneath, where you know, those are pedals, or like the Arpanoid. It's like the arpeggiator pedal that we have. It's more a pitch sequencer than a true like arpeggiator. But like that was an idea like I was always wanted something like that. But I couldn't find anything that did it. Like there's the Digitech whammy pedal, the pitch shifter with the I want to say, well, it's a foot pedal. A foot pedal.
Yeah.
When I say that, I feel like I sound like I don't know what I'm talking about. But I guess that's what it's called, foot pedal. And you know, people had made like MIDI plugins, or like a separate pedal that you would plug into the MIDI jack that would make that arpeggiate. But like, I just wanted a compact pedal. You hit a note and it would play a bunch of notes, and like, you know, things like that. Like and sometimes
Is that like the slicer.
I don't know. I've seen that pedal around. I have no idea what it does. In my mind, it just sounds like a tremolo, but I have no idea what it does.
So like
Yeah, this one, like, you know, it plays you play one note and it just goes up and down the scale, and like you don't really have to do anything with it.
you switch the quality of scale. Is there like a
Yeah,
knob
you
for
get the
that?
major and minor, and then you can switch the amount of steps in it. It's also pretty limited in like what it can do. It can't do everything. It just does what it does. Also I am a big fan of that. Like, I hate things that do a lot of stuff, and I hate things where you have to like open a manual and like read some part of it to get any sound to come out. Like, those are things that I don't like, so they inform my decisions like when designing. As I've gotten further along, like I've made more complicated stuff, and even that stuff confuses me when I have to go back to it. Like if I haven't touched like a Pyramid's flanger in a long time, I'll have to look at the manual for how to like factory reset it, or like store a preset, or remember like what things can do, because I can't remember it. Like at this point we put out almost 100 pedals. Like I can't remember what they all do. I hate it when I get stumped like in front of people when I'm like, I know I made this, but I'm sorry, I don't remember. But yeah, like usually it comes from like just something I want to personally use, or like solving some problem that I have that I haven't seen anything that does it. And lately there's a lot more of just like you know, we've done some artist collaborations. Like we did a pedal with the band Sun, and the pedal with Boris, and I've worked with some other artists too. And like that stuff used to not interest me at all. Like, why would I want to make a pedal for somebody else? Like, why? Like, that concept didn't occur to me. Like, oh, well, that might be fun and successful and a thing regular businesses do. And it turned out, I really like that. And also, like, I take a lot more feedback into consideration than I used to. Like, you know, like we just released the Special Cranker, it's an overdrive, and it's based on an older pedal that we discontinued called the Speaker Cranker, which I had made that one initially. It's just a like kind of, I'll call it like medium gain overdrive, and to me it just sounds like what a Fender amp would sound like if you drove it hard. But I was using at the time the Solid State Music Man amp, which I love solid state amps because they just get really loud and stay clean. But this one kind of sounded sterile, and I was like, well, let me see if I can make something really quick just to put in front of it. And I did, and I used it for a while. And a lot of people would comment on it, like come up to me after a show and be like, what are you using? That sounds cool. It's just a simple pedal. So then that became an Earthquaker product. But when it came out, all it had was one control, and that control was called More. And it was just more gain.
Yeah.
And it intentionally boosted the level like a couple dB and had no tone control. And it was that. And I loved it because it was that simple. You didn't need to think about it. I left it on all the time with just the gain set like around 1. And ultimately everybody thought it was just like a boost pedal, and we kind of just jokingly put, it's not a booster, like a million times in the manual. And still people would be like, oh, I don't want a booster. It's like, it's not a boost pedal. So we discontinued it, and then a lot of people started, every time we discontinue something, suddenly everyone's interested in it. And, we would get comments like, I wish this had a volume control, or I wish you could adjust the tone a little bit. And like I took that into consideration and put that in the pedal, and we relaunched it on Friday last week. It came out,
I got email notification from, I think it might have been Reverb. Had a thing that came out on it.
And I mean, so far it's been wildly successful. So you know, it just proves that like I should take that shit into consideration sometimes.
You seem to have good instincts of what you're doing. I mean, it's working so far.
Thank you. But yeah, and also I've been collaborating with other engineers too, like Avalanche Run and Pyramids were built on a platform. I work with this brilliant engineer from Pittsburgh who used to work for Line 6. His name's Michael Mecca. Like I work with him to develop the platform, like the concept of the platform, and then, you know, designing the program. So like I'm just sitting next to him being like, I like the sounds of all these pedals, and I'm playing guitar and he's coding, and like, you know, just back and forth doing that. And that's fun. And then we hired I was almost going to call him my assistant. He is not my assistant. He's an additional design engineer. He does mostly programming. Matt Martin, a few years ago, and like he's been instrumental in like helping us. Like, you know, like the Astral Destiny was like the first big product he helped work on. We worked on that for like a year and a half before it came out. You know, getting it so we can have presets and like all these ideas that are like beyond my skill level. Like I'm not a programmer. I can handle some stuff, but not in this way where I'm like, you know, I want it to do all these things, and I'm too old and my brain can no longer learn anything else. So it's like he's been awesome at, you know, bouncing ideas off of. So like, yeah, I mean, that stuff has evolved like over time.
Very cool. So something you said there where you're into the solid state amps. Yeah. Another. Was that including your days pre-pedals, or was it?
Yeah. I used I'm specific about it though. Like I was a big fan of Sun amps, the solid state ones in particular, the beta lead and the concert lead. I used those for a long time in the 90s, mostly because they were like $50. Like you could buy them around. And also like there used to be a store in Barberton, Kenmore. People from Barberton would be pissed. Say that. Musician's Bargain Basement. And for whatever reason, like they would just, without fail, like you could go in there and there would be one for $40 or something like that. So it was really easy to get. And then like you'd come home from tour and be broke and put it on eBay and sell it for like $50. But now they're worth like, I don't know, I think that they were up to $1,000 at some point. And I regret every one of those that I ever sold. But like, yeah, like I there was something about solid state that I always liked, and I go through phases. Like right now, I'm big on tube amps. Like I definitely prefer a tube over solid state, but I know I'll probably come back to it. There's probably going to be some other need for solid state.
Yeah.
Cool. Great. With the hundreds of pedals you guys have come up with and put out, is there two-part question? Is there some that you're the most proud of and some that you feel are super original sound that there's nothing like it by any other company?
Yeah. I can't speak now. I don't pay as much attention to what other people are doing now as I used to. Like I used to, not for like, you know, market research or any shit like that, just as a fan of pedals. Like used to really know what was going on out there, but like now lately I kind of am a little oblivious, which I like also. Like it's kind of nice to not know. I don't think that there was anything at all that sounded like the Rainbow Machine. There is an old rack unit, the Harman, what's it called? Eventide harmonizer. I think it's like the H9. That does some similar pitch type effects, but I was not even aware of that when the Rainbow Machine came out. And that's like a rack unit. Afterneath, there wasn't really anything at all, and as far as I know, there still really isn't anything at all that kind of sounds like that pedal. Dispatch Master was like, you know, aside from the Boss like RV3, there weren't really any compact delay and reverb pedals when that thing came out, and now there's a million, you know. There's a couple other things, like Swiss Things is something that like most people don't understand it, but that is probably the most specific pedal that we make, like the most specific geared towards exactly what I need and probably nobody else. It's just the way that it has the effects loops and an ABY output and like the tuner breakout and a volume control. Like it just solves so many problems for me personally. And I hoped that it would translate to other people. And I'll say I'm on the fence that like it works for everybody. But one in particular was that Arpanoid that I was talking about. Like in my mind, like making that thing, I was like, oh, people's minds are going to be blown by this pedal. Like very proud of it. No one cared, and no one still cares. Like, no one knows how to use that pedal. Like it's so confusing to them because it's limiting. There's like a set scale in all this stuff. So it's like the one thing that I keep being like, I gotta make a better version of it.
Yeah, I never heard of that one, and I'm very interested.
Yeah,
just from your description.
I gotta make something that like is more useful. Like maybe the focus was too narrow on that, but I don't know. I'm always surprised at like what works and what doesn't work. Like the Plumes, which came out a few years ago, 2 years ago, is probably, I mean, it's definitely like our highest selling pedal. It was probably our most popular pedal. There was some going into that. I would say it's probably I don't know if contrived is the word for it, but like I knew going into that pedal, like this is a pedal that everybody can use. It's really reasonably priced. That makes it very middle of the road. I bet this will do very well.
Is that the one that has distortion and overdrive?
It's just a single overdrive pedal, and it's based on the Tube Screamer. With a couple of modifications, I guess, that I haven't seen other people do. There's a million Tube Screamer clones. So it was kind of hard to do something different. My first foray into that was the Palisades, which was this, like
Palisades, that's what I was
super intense pedal with all these options. And up until that point, I hated the Tube Screamer. Like people, because it's so common in like the like boutique pedal world, that everybody would come up and be like, which one's your Tube Screamer? We didn't have one. Because I hated the pedal. I still don't love the way the original sounds. I understand. At some point I understood why they used it. So I was like, okay, that sounds cool. Like, what would I do with that circuit? And what I would do was the Palisades. And at the end of the day, the Palisades sounds nothing like a Tube Screamer. Like, the heart of the circuit is based on that, but there's so many features and options, yet not a single one of them is exactly a Tube Screamer. So the Plumes was designed in the process of making the Palisades, but I kind of thought it was too close. But it has some unique things, like it's just higher headroom, like the way it runs off of plus minus 9 volts instead of 9 volts. And the tone control is changed a little bit, and there's some more clipping options, which is something that everybody does, so that's not that unique. But it turned out that like that hunch was correct, and it's like one of our most popular pedals. So like I guess I'm kind of proud that like the concept of it worked. Yeah, I don't know.
What was the moment that you thought that you had crossed into a real player in the pedal world?
Well, I don't think about things that much, but I would definitely say like it was probably like around 2015, 2014, like when we started having like all those employees and like international distribution and like one after another like guitar magazine like featuring us or like coming to the shop, and like we had someone do like a documentary about us, and you know we had started going to the NAMM show, which is like the big musical instrument industry convention that they hold out in Anaheim. You know, like hundreds, like 100,000 people show up. It's big international event. Our booths started getting bigger and the traffic started getting bigger, and there was like one particular NAMM where quite honestly, like, I mean, in all seriousness, like I feel like I had like a complete mental breakdown at it, where it was like so much attention and like so many people like coming up and talking to me, and it felt more like trying to figure out what our secret is and like what are you really doing, like who are you paying? Like all this like weird shit, and like then also like people talking to me like I was like a genius or something like that, and it's like this is overwhelming shit. Like I don't know. I smoke weed and think about pedals. Like it's not for me. And also like our organization is so big and like everybody is important. Like so many, like now we have like 54, maybe more employees, and like almost all of them have major contributions to the company. Like it's not all me. Like, but at the end of the day, like I started it, branded it. I make the pedals still. So like I try to take that stuff into perspective, but like it's just not how I like view myself, I guess, as like the head of this company or something. And that became overwhelming. So yeah, that was when I realized like, okay, rethink this like for yourself, like how you fit into this. Otherwise, I'm gonna lose my fucking mind. And that was like right around the time like when we moved into the current shop that we're in, and I was like, okay, just like take a breath.
Sounds like this
is a great problem to have. This is an awesome problem to have.
Sounds like where you are right now isn't where you set out to go when you started building these pedals. It just it snowballed and snowballed, and like
in my mind, like when I hired like the Jeff, and like we were in the basement and I was making enough money to like quit other jobs. Like it wasn't a ton of money or anything, but it was like enough money to quit other jobs, pay him, and like kind of do what I want. Like that's of course it's what everybody wants to do. Like, but that's kind of like I've always known that's sort of a necessity in my life. Otherwise, I don't know how I would get by. Like, I am not an employee. Like, I can't work for somebody else. Like, it's just not how it works for me. So I kind of always knew, like, I'd have to do something for myself. But that's the problem. Like, running a business isn't like it's not the thing I want to do. And, that's not to say that I don't or anything like that. Like, but it's not my primary focus, I would say. But it is where I'm at. Like, I get to do like what I like to do, which is, to put it simply, like play guitar and think of cool sounds. And I'm fortunate enough to have all these other like super talented, smart people who like want to come work for us because of like, I guess it's just kind of the culture we created or whatever to like make that a reality. And in turn, I think it makes it, possible for them to kind of live that life to some extent, They're all creative, like artists or musicians and stuff like that, and they get to make art and they get to like go on tour and play music and stuff and be in an environment where that's like supported.
That's great. Happy employees, happy company.
Well, I hope they're happy. I don't know if I answer your question. I feel like I went off on like a tangent about like how I feel or something.
That happens here all the time, and that's why we like doing it. We have a lot of fun talking about it.
And then we forget what question we even asked.
Yeah, I don't remember anymore. I think it was me probably bitching about not wanting.
Who wants a boss?
Yeah, that's probably what it was. As it turns out, you do need one. I think everybody needs some guidance.
First time I was aware of Earthquaker pedals was at Woodsys Music in Kent.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and when I was first starting out, like building my own tone in my board, I was a guitar student there, and I remember going into Woodsys and like almost half of the pedals they had in like their pedal cases were like these sick designs and like things I'd never heard of, and a little out of my price range. I'm still like doing Boss pedals, but I'm like, whoa, those are great, and like they let me mess around with a few of them, and I'm like aspiring to like be able to afford these pedals one day. But really, back to the design, like that will always stick with me, like as how they all looked like they belonged together.
Yeah, I that was important to me. I guess I kind of glossed over that early, like, as I became aware of like the boutique pedal industry. I have said that word more times than I have ever said in my life. I think the last half an hour.
Do you have a suggested replacement for the boutique?
I just don't know any other way to put it. Like it's weird, like
vintage looking.
Yeah, vintage looking. I don't know. Yeah, interesting. That like there were very few people doing that. Like Death by Audio comes to mind. ZVEX was like hand painting the pedals, and there's Devi Ever effects. They might have been called something else back then. But otherwise, people were just like, it just said like tone distortion, things like that. And like obviously, like Boss has their it's an aesthetic for sure, but it's just nothing was eye catching. And then in like the big industry, like there's obviously Electro Harmonics where they weren't necessarily putting graphics on pedals, but they were definitely designy. Like they looked like you wanted to touch them, and that's like kind of the appeal. It was like what I was trying to convey, like make it look like a piece of art that you want to touch and you want to play with. And nobody was really doing it then. And now it's, we're archaic by modern day standards. People are putting like really intricate, awesome, like multicolor, like really cool looking artwork on pedals, and it's just more common. But like in doing that for so long, like we've developed a brand identity and an aesthetic that like you can still spot it when you see it.
Cool.
So what took you from the transition to guitar from drums? You said you started as a drummer.
Well, I've been playing drums since like as long as I can remember. I was like 5, but I loved Van Halen.
All right.
When I was young, and I would say like somewhere like I was probably like 10 years old, maybe even younger. It's like, oh, I want to do that. I want to play guitar with Van Halen. Whatever kind of maniac brain that I had then. And I took one guitar lesson at Woodsys, and I brought my Kramer Focus in and brought him of all Van Halen records, 5150, and tried to learn Summer Nights. And the dude looked at me like I was insane because I had 0 guitar skills. He's like, here, learn how to play Michael Rode the Boat Ashore. And I did, and was like, I hate guitar. Like, this is boring. And then like I just kind of like didn't take any more lessons and just screwed around with the guitar endlessly. Could not comprehend. Like it was more like I'm making shapes on the guitar, but like it wasn't registering as music at all. But I just kept at it. And it's like 2 uncles who are awesome, like brilliant, like really good guitar players in totally different ways. And my Uncle Danny, who passed away, he taught me how to play drums, really, but he also played guitar. He was more of like a melodic, kind of like hooky guitar player. And he would like kind of show me a little bit of stuff here and there, and kind of just was more of like a supportive role in like, just like, yeah, awesome. Here, you want to play guitar? Play my guitar. Like, you want to play drums? Play my drums. But my Uncle Doug showed me like just a couple chords, like wrote them down. I was like, here, just do this. And I like learned those chords and was like, okay, that's how you make those sounds. I was probably like 12 years old, and then that just got me super stoked on it, and I really haven't put a guitar down since. Like, it's so much like I do. I don't know. Like I feel like I'm like talking myself up or something, but I feel like I have like kind of a unique way of playing guitar now, and like that just kind of influences like what I gravitate towards too, like the music that I listen to, and also coming from more of a drumming background, it's also rhythmic at the same time. And to me, it's like it's the easiest way for me to like create, like just get whatever like music I hear in my head out, both rhythmically and melodically, like at the same time. And drums is like, they're more aggressive. Like I was definitely like, I would hurt myself constantly playing drums. I was like a wild drummer. Also always just trying to be fast with everything all the time. And, you know, it started to hurt. I also smoked cigarettes. My lungs started to not work anymore, and like got older, and it was exhausting taking the drums apart and putting them back together all the time.
Yeah.
And it was just, they sort of like fell by the wayside. and guitar took like the forefront. To me, like there's a lot more interesting things that I personally can do with guitar. And there's so many like little like pedals and amps and different styles of guitars that make like drastically different sounds. And it's just like more expressive, I guess, than the drums to me. But recently I've gone back to playing the drums, and I realized like that's something that's been missing from my life. Like I put them down. I'll say I put them down for like 15 years, but I would come back to them occasionally because in my mind, it was an instrument that I knew so well that I didn't have to touch them and I could just go back and everything would be cool. And then I learned my lesson the hard way, probably like 5 years ago, where someone was like, let's play drums. And I was like, oh my God, like my brain is telling me to do this stuff, but my body physically can't do it. And it was really frustrating. And I was like, all right, well, now's the time. Like, you're either done with that or like you gotta like practice.
Yeah.
And I can't say I'm really practicing, but I've recently gone back to him and like started recording drums to like guitar parts that I've written and stuff, and trying to think more about it. Like, seriously, in the last 2 or 3 months, we're like, I got to get back to that. Like, if at the very least for exercise.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Good workout. Good way to vent out the
it
frustrations.
really is.
And you were in a band called Drummer, right?
I was a guitarist and drummer.
Yeah.
A band full of 5 drummers.
Is that why you called it Drummer?
I was embarrassingly, yes.
Yeah,
That is why. Like, it feels so stupid to be like, that's why we called it Drummer, but it is. We knew how dumb it was.
Hey, no problem.
I've got an embarrassing band name that we can tie into our first sponsor there, Chuck Kaminsky.
Mm-hmm.
So Chuck Kaminsky from Basement Trader, he used to host a jam night in Willoughby there that I would ride my bike to when I was like in middle school. Even like people knew my dad, so I was able to get in. They're like, yeah, he's cool. So we went there and we had one of my first bands we put together. We had no name or anything. It was 3 of us, and the bass player's mom came up there, and Chuck knew the bass player's mom because she got lessons at the store he was working at and stuff. So he's like, all right, let me introduce your band. What are you guys calling yourselves? I go, we're the Muff Divers. Like a couple like 14-year-olds. He's like, your mom's here. I can't go out there calling you guys the Muff Divers. So he still talks about that all the time. One of his most embarrassing moments there was introducing the Muff Divers. But,
Yeah, that was unfortunate. Yeah,
but,
all around.
But
Tell
Chuck
us more about
Kaminsky?
this Chuck Kaminsky.
He's
guy.
a hell of a dude. The Basement Trader out of Paynesville. He does a lot of setup work. He's also selling a lot of used gear on Reverb and can get you new gear as well. Check him out. It's Basement Trader, BASSMENTTRADER. 2 T's, right?
Mm-hmm. Don't forget www.
Oh, yeah. We got to say that because we're old. But check out Chuck. He's an awesome dude. And ask him about the Muff Divers.
I will.
I don't think I will, but
So there, in that band, Drummer was Pat Carney was in that band, right?
yes, he
Yeah.
was
So let's.
the most famous of the drummers in the
I'd
drummer
like
band.
to know more about your work with him and how you came to work with the Black Keys as tour manager.
Well, I'd known him. I want to back up just a second. I was just making a joke about not visiting the website on the internet. I'm not serious about that. Anyway, well, I started working for the band pretty haphazardly, to be honest with you. But I've known Pat for a while before he was in Black Keys. I met him when he was like 17 years old. I don't know how much older I am than him, but not too much. But he used to come out to Kent, and we used to go to this bar called, I think it was called The Library. It changed names a bunch of times. It had a really ridiculous futuristic name for a while. It's like escaping me. Genesis.
Club
It's called the
Chameleon?
Genesis. And their deal was, this is probably so disgusting, and I cannot imagine why we didn't get sick, but it was like 5-cent beers and 10-cent hot dog night. I don't understand how people were just barfing hot dogs like everywhere at this place. But yeah, he would go there when he was really young, and he would just, and not in a serious way, like it's hard to convey this, like just dance, like kind of, like, I don't know, like it was just goofy. Everyone was like, who is this kid? And he was like dancing with college girls and shit, and they would bring these signs and stuff, like cheering him on. It was so weird. Like that's my memory of him. I don't know if it's exactly that way, but like he liked our bands, and he would come see our bands and stuff. And then he was in a couple bands himself, like more like kind of like twee pop bands and stuff like that. And Yeah, we had a cool group of friends who were all super creative, and they still are. There's this band, House Guest, from Akron. Best band from Akron, House Guest. I played drums in it for a minute, but that was not the best era of House Guest. Like, they broke up a while ago, but they're so fucking good. Yeah, he just kind of introduced me to that world of things, and like, yeah, I remember like he started how the Black Keys started. I think pretty haphazardly. Like Dan had a band that was supposed to record with Pat, and they didn't show up, so him and those two just like recorded what is the first Black Keys record in like an afternoon, just because the band didn't show up and they're fucking around. And he shopped it around, and like my wife Julie like booked their first show, and like I think maybe it was their booking agent for the first tour. I can't remember exactly. And then like my band
Beachland
party.
Ballroom, right?
What's that?
Beachland Ballroom.
Yeah,
The first
the
show,
Beachland. Yeah, it was at the Tavern, I think. And my band at the time, the Party of Helicopters, we had been together for a while at that point. Like we were kind of at this like weird. We toured a lot, but like it was like it's like people who knew who we were, and like we had gotten like a mention in like a top 10 albums and Spin like at the end of one year. So like there was like this weird brief period of time where it was like, oh, a bunch of people are coming to our shows. Like when we go on tour, like we're about sick of doing this shit, like playing in basements to nobody for like $20 a night. You know, you could do that back then. Gas was like free, and you could find garbage vans for $200 and just go tour the country. And we were actively like we were at like this point where we were like, okay, we can either not do this or we can just focus on this all the time. We decided like, okay, we'll give it a year or maybe 2 years and we'll just do this. So we were actively trying to like find a label who would give us money and like more promotion and stuff like that than the label we were on. And they were trying to do the same thing.
Black Keys.
Yeah, the Black Keys. And I don't even think that they had really toured, but yeah, we both almost signed to the same label, Velocet Records, and Velocet Records came from the ashes of Capricorn Records, which had been around forever, like from the 60s, I want to say, like, you know, like the Allman Brothers were on that label, and like in later days, 311. And the label folded, and Phil Walden, like he was still alive when we signed to Velocet, but like his daughter took it over, and it became like a really small indie label called Velocet, and they almost signed both of us. But the Black Keys backed out because it wasn't like what they wanted. It wasn't like a good deal. We bit and took it because it was like the best thing that was like an offer. And then they found, I think, a live and took off, and we just didn't do much after that, and we broke up. And they had just gotten like, that was like the, you know, Pat has this, you know, they're a talented band, so they're both hard workers, but Pat was just like, he just knew how to like go, he was no shame, like, I mean this in a good way, like going up to people and being like, here's my band, check it out. And like they, you know, they worked, they did like, they'll put in the work, like, like it wasn't like handed to them or whatever, like, you know, they did all the same things that my band did. It was just like at rapid rate, like, I was
like
way more reserved.
5 albums, right, before they blew up.
I was like way more reserved
Brothers.
and kind of like embarrassed about like promoting my own bands, where he would just go out and just be like, hey, we're great, check it out. So in my mind, they were wildly successful right off the bat. You know, to me, like that, what they were doing, like selling out 300 capacity clubs everywhere, like that was like the best I could have ever hoped for me. And then they just kept getting bigger and bigger, and my band broke up, and they happened to like book a tour where they started on the West Coast in Seattle, and they needed somebody to drive their van there with their gear, and they were just going to fly in. So I did that for $1,000, and that $1,000 included food and hotels, and so I did that drive in under 48 hours.
Wow.
From Akron
to
Seattle, like in exactly the amount of time it takes to do it without stopping, is what I did.
Wow.
And then I showed up like completely delirious and like felt like I was like on a ship or something like that. And then I just went with them for a couple shows, and like I think it was on that trip. At some point, I was like like Pat was going to check into a hotel and like pulling out a Slim Jim and like hundreds or thousands of dollars falling out of his bag, and I was like, all right, like I have toured way more. Like I know what like a tour manager does. I'll be your tour manager. And I feel like in the beginning it might have just been like a joke, like almost like, yeah, whatever, he's the tour manager. But then I became one, and that's like the start of that. And like I was a tour manager in tech for a long time, and like it was me and a sound guy, and that was the whole crew for
What years?
All the way from from the end, I think, of what's the record, the white record with the hair stuff on it, Thick Freakness. I think from the end of that, or maybe from the start of Rubber Factory all the way up until right before Brothers came out, I think.
Cool.
Maybe that's too long. They had started...
Did you tour with Attack and Release with them?
Maybe that was the one where I stopped in the middle. I stopped working for them, but I was with them when all the songs, they were playing the songs and they were recording it in Painesville with... Yeah, I don't know. I think I was part of it still with them then, but I didn't do international stuff with them, which was a big deal. Like they needed somebody to like kind of do it all, and I couldn't do that. Like between my jobs and kids and Earthquaker and stuff like that, the longest, there's one stretch there where like it was like 6 months straight. And I lost my fucking mind on that thing. Like, that proved that it was not good for me, like in every way, mentally, physically, like it just wasn't good. And like, at that point they had gotten so big they needed more commitment, and I got essentially let go. So, but I mean, it was exciting to like work in that capacity, like, because none of my bands ever had like that kind of success. It was like fun to graduate from a van to like a tour bus, or like even like going from like, you guys shouldn't own a van anymore, you can make money just to rent a van, that way it doesn't matter if it breaks down, like shit like that. Or like kind of learning how to negotiate like a tour manager. And to be honest with you, like if you're gonna like break into it, like that was about as easy as like you could possibly get. Like it's two people that are relatively like manageable like people, and they sold everything out all the time. So it's like there's no arguing about money. There's no nothing. It's just really easy. It's like you sold out, and here's the overage, and I will take the check now, please, thank you. And they had really great management and booking agents, and a lot of times like you wouldn't even have to get paid after the show. It would have already been negotiated beforehand because it sold out. Like, but yeah, kind of like haphazardly like ended up being a tour manager by being like, I'm the tour manager. So
all right,
that's my experience in working with them.
Didn't mean to spend so much time on that, but very, very informative.
That's probably
nice,
the
good
most time
stories.
that I have ever spent talking about that. So
Well, they're a huge influence on my musicality, so it's good insight. Thank you.
yeah.
Of course. Cool. We have some more questions for you, don't we, about Earthquake?
Oh, yeah, let me check. So, a mutual friend of ours that was the singer for our Red Hot Chili Peppers band, his son is a huge Earthquaker fan, so he actually sent me some questions.
Is this Jacob?
No, this is
That's Chuck's
this is
son.
Dex.
Dennis' son.
Yeah, this is Dennis's son, Dex. He would like to know. This is the first time we have like a viewer question.
Yeah.
So could you explain what it was like to do ASO Goes Electric and how it's been seeing instruments that we don't typically associate with pedals being affected by your pedals?
ASO Goes Electric. So that was the symphony project,
Yes.
right?
Akron Symphony Orchestra for the creeps and listeners.
I gotta be honest with you. So Julie, my wife, she's on the board for the orchestra there, and she was a lot more involved in that whole project. And she, I knew that we were doing something, and I knew that like John Sonnenberg John Sonnenberg wrote the piece that they performed, and this guy Jake Gunnar Walsh like helped him compose it, and they worked together on this. I had known that John was working really hard on this thing, and John is somebody that I worked with. He's a brilliant musician, but also like even more brilliant electronic engineer. Like I worked with him on like the last version of our Afterneath pedal, and he works at a contract manufacturer that we use in Akron called Circle Prime. So like we have we work together in a lot of different capacities. So I knew that like they were doing all this thing, but I didn't necessarily understand like I guess the magnitude of it, like what it really was. And it ended up being this thing that John wrote, and those two composed it, and then the symphony just like performed this like 20-some minute piece, and John like really put a lot of thought into like what instruments would get run through what pedals to like create like some kind of vibe. Like just it was so not what I was prepared for that like when I went to the rehearsal of it the morning of and like was like, whoa, like I don't know if I'm an idiot, and people were telling me all this stuff, and I just wasn't like I don't know like where my head was, but like it was so far like above like what I thought it really would be. Like I mean, I'm still trying to kind of like process like an orchestra performed this like piece that your friend wrote specifically for these pedals that like I designed and like was manipulated through like this live orchestra for regular orchestra people, and it was like really successful. Like it was like one of their highest like attendances, like one of the highest attended performances in a long time. It's mind blowing. I mean, it's super cool. Like I can't even comprehend like how much effort went into that, and like the end result was amazing. It was really cool, even without the pedals involved. Like the piece it was cool to see the orchestra do something like that.
Do you see ever coming out with pedals that are more geared towards orchestral instruments?
Not necessarily, but we've been shown time and time again that like the pedals are primarily designed for guitar, but like they have a lot of like kind of amazing uses on other stuff. Like when we started doing the NAMM show, like people would show up with harps and flutes and like different woodwinds or harmonicas and stuff like that, and like show me like ways that I could never imagine like the pedals sounding by having these different instruments. So it would be hard to design for something that I don't play and don't fully understand like the physics of, but like all of them can always be used on pretty much anything, and people do. So I'm always blown away when I see it. We did a series of videos with people from the Akron Symphony playing through the pedals, and they weren't like our most popular videos, but in my mind, like they were some of the coolest things that we ever did. Like it was awesome to hear that stuff, like being because I'm used to hearing it in like an environment like at NAMM, which is like 1,000 guitar centers packed into like thing, and it's like, oh, that's really cool. But to hear it like well recorded, well shot, they're all on our YouTube channel. It's awesome to see.
Absolutely. Everybody, once again, check out the Earthquaker YouTube channel because there's some great content on there. We covered some of the other questions. Yeah, link below. So what are some of your favorite Japanese bands?
My favorite Japanese bands. I love Boris. That kind of goes without saying. We did the pedal with Wada. Melt Banana is one of my favorite Japanese bands, and they were like the first band. Like when we started going over there, and they were like, "What artists can we work with?" Like in their mind, they're thinking big rock and roll, like Japan, because there's a whole like Japan has their whole scene. Like there's big name Japanese artists over there that we don't know who they are. In my mind, like Melt Banana was like, and they're pretty obscure, like very chaotic, like definitely big in like the art punk world in like the 90s, but pretty obscure back then and especially now, but very unique guitar playing, like wild guitarist. I kept bringing them up, and people would be like, why do you keep talking about this band? Like, no one cares about them. Like here, but I find them to be super, like, at least inspirational. I wouldn't say influential. Boredoms was another band. Like, I like all these like Japanese kind of harsh, like noise type bands.
So going from noise bands in Kent to
I know there's a couple. There's a band called Light from there that are amazing. Light are super good. Mono. I don't know how I forgot Mono. became good friends with them, but was always a fan. My band Party of Helicopters played with them on the first time they came to the U.S., like in probably 1999, 2000, something like that. And like they couldn't speak any English at all. I remember like trying to have a conversation with them, and like they just weren't saying anything. I was like, oh, they're pretty rude, weird. And then they played, and I was like, oh my god, they're so good. Mono, amazing bands. Yeah, I know I'm forgetting a bunch.
It
right
happens
now,
to
but,
everybody
like,
that sits on.
but those are definitely like my favorite ones. You know.
Okay.
There's this incredible band. I wish. I think they're called Ogre You Asshole. I think that's what they're called. But I saw them at this festival when we were over there one time, and they were mind-blowing. I bought their records, and the records aren't exactly like what they're like live. But it's like kind of like Radiohead stayed more in their rock area, but got way more experimental. If that makes sense, because Radiohead got very experimental, but like kind of out of the rock context. That's what this band reminded me of live, and I was like, I don't know, unfortunate name, but like, God, they are so good.
Ogre You Asshole.
Yeah, I think that's what they're called.
You asshole.
But light is those light, and I mean all these bands are modern bands, but like those are ones I don't think have really come to the U.S. Yeah, I don't know. There's a bunch of them, but those are some of my favorites I can think of right now.
All right, so that was our latest segment, the questions from the viewers. Thank you,
viewer
Dex.
Right. I want to take 1 second to thank one of our sponsors, Unrefined. Unrefined is a new 100% gluten and dairy-free meal prep service in Cleveland. They use local vendors for their products, and the food is always served fresh, never frozen. If you're within 35 miles of downtown Cleveland, they'll deliver right to your door. And pickup is also available in Ohio City. Instagram, find them at Unrefined CLE, or go to their website, unrefinedls.com. Check out their whole menu. It's great. Great food, especially the Asian glazed chicken. It's my favorite. You can put the code CS20 and get 20% off your first order.
All right.
All right. And now, back to the show.
Well, I'll let you take it from here.
Okay. I'm going to take it.
Take it. What?
All right, Jamie, thanks for coming out again.
Of course, yeah. Thanks for having me.
We now this is a podcast where we usually interview musicians in the Northeast Ohio scene that are in bands or writing music, putting out shows or art. And I'm wondering, is there anybody in the music scene that you like have worked with exclusively, or have made a pedal for, or have anyone that's caught your attention? Any music you like? Some of your favorite bands from around here?
I haven't worked with anyone locally on anything like a product or anything like that we released. And I kind of hit that point in my life where I only go out to shows if I play the show, or like an artist that Earthquaker works with. But I am trying to change that, so I'm just a little bit more aware of like our music scene, and also like my oldest daughter Sylvia, she's turning 17, and she's got like a huge interest in music now, and she wants to go to like every show, and it's like, trying to support that and take her to as many as I can, but I'm also like exhausted like, every night by that stuff and the interaction.
I'm already starting to feel that.
Yeah, it's so
Can't
hard.
stay all the way through the last band.
But there's bands that like I tend to play with a lot that I really like. There's recently both of my bands. I play guitar in a band called Relaxer, and I play bass in a band called Nervous Future.
Oh, Relaxer's all Earthquaker dudes, right?
Yeah, it was. Well, Joe Scott, our singer guitar player, he worked there twice in his life. Early on in the basement, and then he worked there through the pandemic, but he no longer works there. But everybody else is there. Nervous Future, entirely Earthquaker people, and that band used to be called Fringe Candidate, but our guitar player, Joe, who I was in Party of Helicopters with, who also works at Earthquaker, quit, and then we hired my cousin, Mikey, whose dad, Doug, taught me how to play guitar, and he also works at Earthquaker. So that is very
He taught you the
family oriented.
row the boat ashore song.
No, he taught me the 3 chords that showed me how to play More Than Words by Extreme.
Classic.
So yeah, those bands. Again, this is where I scare the shit out of me. But like, we play with this band Flock of Moons, who are relatively new, and I think that they're great. Free Black, awesome. Oregon Space Trail of Doom, I love that
yes.
band. And Knights, I really like Knights. We just played with a band that is pretty new.
Knights with 2 eyes, right?
I think so. Yeah, I'm bad at the
If you're looking that up.
yeah. God, there's a lot of really great bands, and they're all like falling. Like I'm a big fan of like Gabe Schrey. He's a solo performer, but he's super awesome. He was in that band House Guest that I was talking about. Yeah. This band, their name is. They have a name where I was like, how the hell can you call your band this? How isn't this band? I think they're called Language. They are really good. The last show I played was with that band. I don't know. There's definitely a lot of stuff going on. Like there's like a new space that just opened up called The Cave, which people from Earthquaker are heavily involved in, but it's like a DIY kind of like arts space, and that just opened up in Akron, and that's super cool. And then there's a studio there, Akron Recording. I believe it's Arc. And we've shot a bunch of videos in their studio, and like a lot of like their scene, like they're really active musicians who do a lot of really cool stuff. And like, I wish that it's not that I'm not supportive, but I'd feel unsupportive by like not going out to seeing shows. But like, I did so much of that when I was young, nonstop for like 15, 20 years that eventually I just got like, I can't.
We kind of glossed over the fact that this is Akron. Like, Akron is a different music scene than Cleveland. You feel?
Well, I do, and some of those bands that I named are from Cleveland.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think about like Akron bands. I mean, you know.
Can you talk to us about some of the venues in Akron? Because you're our first Akron-based guest.
Yeah, I mean, we tend to. I most frequently play Musica, which is an awesome venue.
Place is awesome.
It was that's the venue with like the good views from the audience and like a good sound system, and like I don't know, I like that it has a patio outside and all that stuff. Or Annabelle's, which is more of a basement show kind of vibe. But like we just played Annabelle's, and it was my first time indoors there in like 2 years since the pandemic and everything. And they like really, I mean, they made it really nice. There's all these video games down there. They painted. It sounds good.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's well lit. Like, and that's an awesome place to play too. I really like that.
I'm gonna have to go back there then. It's been some years since before
yeah,
the pandemic.
it's cool. I'm totally happy playing those 2 places. I really like the feeling of Annabelle's just because. Just playing with like the audience like right there,
Right
like
there,
it feels better than like being on a stage to me. I go back and forth on that. Like a band like Relaxer, where it's like super loud. We have all these lights and fog and stuff like that. It's nice, and like everyone's got so much gear. It's nice to be on a stage because like it keeps all that stuff away from like getting tangled. But like Nervous Future is much more of like a punk band, and it's more fun to be like engaged in the audience. I don't know. That's the feeling that I guess I like. And there used to be a place there called Hive Mind, which is very DIY, like kind of converted garage art space that I really enjoyed playing. But I grew up in house shows, like playing in houses, and I hit a point where I was like, I can't play in another house. But like now I'm kind of like, I've done a couple house shows as an adult, and aside from feeling like the responsible party when the cops show up, like it's fun. Like I definitely miss doing stuff like that. And there's a bunch of houses in Akron that I think I'm too old to play at. That like my stepson Gavin, like his friends would go to, or like his bands would play at. But yeah, those are the 2 places that I typically go to.
All right. Well, we're about out of time. We appreciate you coming
Yeah.
so much. Like, we've been looking forward to this episode.
Yeah, thanks for taking
Yeah.
the time for us.
Thanks,
today.
thanks for having me. Sorry, I had to cancel a couple times.
Yeah, I wasn't
all right.
going to say that. But yeah, there he is. Yeah. After multiple attempts, Jamie Stillman. Thank you.
Oh, we got the one final question that we ask all our guests, and this is usually one where they're also sitting there going, "Oh, I can't think of it. It's on the tip of my tongue." But we always finish with a movie recommendation or TV show recommendation.
Oh boy, I'm big on documentaries. I'll just can't think of one off the top of my head. I am currently watching Billions, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to anybody because it's not my style. Arrested Development. I feel like everybody
watching
should
it right now.
should watch
Yes.
Arrested Development.
I'm watching for the first time right now. We're in season 2.
Yeah, the first time. Yeah, thank you.
You gotta stick with
It's
it.
one of my-
There's
yeah.
callbacks, like all the way, like, even in the new season,
Even
all the way
in
back
4
to the
and 5,
first.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. That's what I've heard. So I'm enjoying it so much so
That's
far.
great. That's my favorite show of all time.
Cool. They've got a great podcast too.
I know.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah. Smartless. If
yeah.
anyone out there needs another podcast besides this one to listen to.
Yeah, and the Always Sunny podcast is great too.
Yes,
It
it
is.
is.
That's another favorite show.
Yeah.
Great. All right, Jamie Stillman. Thanks again for coming through. Everyone go check out Earthquaker Devices' YouTube channel and demos on their amazing pedals and tones.
And see him on a pedal board near you at any show you go to.
That's right. So for the Cuyahoga Sound Podcast, I'm Evan Stone.
I'm Chuck Schilling.
Peace.